Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for inviting me this evening before such an august audience. And I think I should thank Sucheta for thinking about me and inviting me with so much of warmth and so much of conviction about the issues and about what I would like to share with you. So I'm here at her invite, but I'm so happy to see so many of you here in this audience, more particularly to know that there's so much of an interest that is probably generated in these issues which are there, which obviously has to be backed by a little bit of basic knowledge. And I think that's the reason why Sucheta must have thought that that I would be someone who can share my views, my experiences, and a little bit of knowledge that I have on this subject. Just only from the point of view of backing the interest with a little bit of substance, as they would call it. Because these days, if you open any of these pages, Times of India, any of these newspapers which you see, a lot of emphasis is given on these cases which happens in the court, and it is read by one and all, not necessarily by lawyers or by people who are connected with it, but there's a lot of interest which is generated, and obviously the press or the media prints what sells, if I may put it in that manner. And I think this is what sells, and what sells is the fact that there's a lot of interest in these matters which revolve around, say, family matters, as you may be seeing, cases of divorce, custody, etc., about matters of violence on women, the uses, the abuses, the sections, and the various enactments. We also have the electronic media, which holds very massive panel discussions, if they are called discussions, if any. They are sort of voicing views of all the different people concerned about the relevant laws and so on and so forth. So based on this background, I just thought that I would like to share a few of these things which are there. The subject of what really I know a little bit is very, very vast if you go under the umbrella of violence. But today I'm going to restrict myself only to two main subjects which are there, which is the Sexual Harassment Act of 2013. What does it mean in simple words? And as Sucheta very, very rightly stated, that it's more for the men to know what the law is than for the women, because so that they are not wrongly framed, or they know what they are doing, and if they do what they are not supposed to do, then they know what the repercussions are. So it's a combination of all these things which are there. And the second subject which I'm going to talk to all of you is about the Indian Penal Code and the amendment which was made to it in the year 1983, which introduced what is known as Section 498A. And what does it mean? Is it a number? Is it a section? It means the rights that are given to a woman who is treated with cruelty, which may be physical, emotional, mental. So that cruelty terminology has been expanded to cover all these things. And whoever also makes illegal demands, monetary demands in the form of dowry, etc. What are the penal provisions which are there? So these are the two main subjects that I'm going to talk about. And of course, I would like to talk less, and I would like to throw it open to all of you. If you have any kind of area-specific questions, which I will be sort of more than happy, if I have the knowledge, to share it with you. Instead of just rambling and giving you certain sections and things which are there. So here we are. So having said all these things, I would like to sort of start by saying that I'm extremely happy that all of you are here, and I'm thankful to all of you, Sucheta, for inviting me before such a wonderful audience which is there. And I take this opportunity to discuss on these two topics which are there. And so you will all appreciate that law cannot be static and will necessarily have to be malleable enough to cater to the ever-changing socio-cultural needs and demands of the society. Our present lawmakers and interpreters have believed that the good of the large overrides at times the oppressive relic of the past. How beautifully stated. This is one of the judgments which they have stated. Hence, Nyaya, as it is understood in Sanskrit, at every stage will have to be governed by dharma. and will have to adapt and cannot be static. So this is the basis which I just read out to you, on which the laws have been framed, on which is what is the ethos of the laws and the judiciary and the legislation for interpreting, for legislating and framing various enactments and laws which are there. So we all know that over a period of time, as we've seen, I think more than a decade or 2 decades, we have seen a substantial increase in the number of crimes that have taken place, and crimes especially on women. The question that arises is that, is it that the numbers have gone up, or is it that there is more awareness, or is it something that people are now coming out and talking about it and want to take relief from things which are there? I believe it's a combination of all these 3 things, and it is more importantly that people want to know about it and people want to take help from these things which are there. As Sucheta mentioned, that the most horrific gang rape which took place in the year December of 2012, the Nirbhaya case as we all know it, was really the turning point in that sense of the word, and was the churning point which brought to highlight the inadequacies of the law, which brought to highlight the apathy towards these horrific incidents like rape and so on and so forth, and what happened, the aftermath of all that. It was it may not be improper for me to say, it was in a manner a revolutionary thing that happened, and at that probably she had to be the martyr for that, because she was raped, she was gang raped, and she died. But the thing that she left behind, and I would say, and we owe it to her, is a revolution within the society that took place, which compelled the lawmakers to take cognizance of this and take some act. I think that is one of the things that none of us really ever understand. That because it was only because of this that people took up to the streets of Delhi, people took up these candle marches, people took up these various things, coming to the streets and making this entirely a thing that this is not about a mother losing a daughter. It is about all of us. We are with them and we cannot tolerate such things happening. That is where the cognizance was taken, the Justice Verma Committee was appointed, and the Justice Verma Committee, which consisted of the retired then Chief Justice, Mr. Justice Verma, and Dr. Gopal Subramaniam and Mrs. Leela Seth. This is the committee which is the Verma Committee as is popularly known, which was given the task of legislating, making suggestions for the legislature to bring about some kind of an awareness, to make it preventive and deterrent for these for the crimes that were committed, and lastly and more importantly, what could be the various crimes which none of us had ever envisaged that but existed for times immemorial, but were never taken notice of. And that is where the suggestions which were made by the Justice Verma Committee was, and can you imagine that till 2013, which is when the Sexual Harassment Act, as we'll call it, which is for the protection of women, basically it was there. There was no enactment to that effect till the year 2013, and the act came into force only after the recommendations of the Justice Verma Committee. Secondly, but prior to that, when I come to the details of the act, I will like to tell you that the Supreme Court, and today I'll tell you one thing, and I can say it with great pride, that today the judiciary is taking upon itself, and I'm saying upon itself because, as you know, the Constitution has 3 various limbs of it, which is the judiciary, the legislature and the executive, and they are expected to do their jobs independently without interfering in each other. So we have the separation things. But today, looking at the social structure, looking at the number of crimes that have gone up, and looking at the social fabric, and the lack of or inability on the part of the legislation to keep in pace with the problems which are there and bring out the necessary laws, is taken upon itself the job, or as they call it, the onus of doing what is known as judicial activism, which at times goes beyond the realm of what the judiciary is supposed to do, which is the interpreting or the interpretation of the law. And this is extremely important. You must have seen in these 2G scams, etc., which was unearthed, and there was a whole lot of cases, etc., which were filed. was only due to the active role taken by the Supreme Court in bringing that this what is happening right under our nose, we cannot overlook it, we cannot ignore it, and it needs to be taken care of. And this is also one of the things which was there. So for the Sexual Harassment Act, which came in 2013, we all know that the famous case of Vishaka versus State of Rajasthan, which is popularly known as Vishaka's judgment, where the Supreme Court, 3 judges bench, took the view that sexual harassment at workplace for a woman has to be dealt in an extremely sensitive, in an extremely stringent, and in an extremely strict manner. We cannot gloss over it, we cannot let it pass by saying that, okay, it happens, so what? I mean, it's alright if somebody just sends you a lewd message, who's your colleague in the office sitting next to you, and it's okay, don't respond to it, it's alright. Or if he just, you're walking or you're in the elevator and inappropriately just touches you at your shoulder or some other part of your body, it's okay. So that was the thought process which was there, which the courts took a very, very strong view and said that no, this cannot be permitted, and that is why the guidelines were set down in the Vishaka judgment, as they call it. Until the act came into force, the internal committee, complaints committee, has been following the guidelines of the Vishaka judgment. So without making it very technical, can I say in very simple words what happens? You have an organization. In that organization you have men, you have women, we have all kinds of people which are working. So what is it that you have to do as an organization to ensure that the women's safety is taken care of or their security is taken care of? Before the act came into existence, and I'll come to the details of the act, that if any complaint to that effect, and what is sexual harassment? I'm going to read out the definition so we know how wide and how it encompasses a lot of things which are there. That if any complaint comes from a lady worker about a person or persons who are indulging into any kind of activities which are supposed to be, which are inappropriate in nature, whether sexual or otherwise, or tending towards or coloring towards sexual advances, what is the remedy that is available to her, and what is it that as an organization you can do, or the employers as they call it can do to ensure that there is some strict action taken. So these are the issues that were actually what is in simple words to be dealt with. And how do you deal with that is what is given as a guideline in Vishaka. So what do you have? You have an internal complaint committee. So there has to be a separate committee which is to be set up. This committee will deal only with the cases of this. Now whom does this committee comprise of? Does it comprise of all men? Does it comprise of only women? So they say that there has to be a chairperson who is a lady. Then there has to be other 2 members which are there, which are of the senior level in the administration, who are also ladies. And there has to be an NGO or an outsider. So for example, they prefer lawyers, or they prefer some activist who is a women's activist, who will also be on the committee, who would be an independent, like how you have in the board of directors, you have independent directors. So you have an independent person who is a part of the committee to deal with it. So this is what, even how a committee has to be formed, or who are the persons who can be the committee, is mentioned in that in the guidelines, and now of course in the enactment, which I'll come to a little later. So how does it happen? So this committee is there. Then what happens? There's a lady here, her colleague is sending her some messages, or he's sending his, even if you forward, okay, and this is how the law is, and that's why we all need to be very, very careful about it. Sometimes what you may do in a jest, and I'm not saying that every time a person sends this has any ill intentions, even if it is done in a jest. Why is it so important? And that's what Sucheta said. Why is it so important for us to know that certain things even in jest cannot be said, because these could be the ramifications or the repercussions. So as I was saying, that if there is a complaint that comes that this is a person who is forwarding me all, sexually colored messages or explicit kind of things which are there, which according to her are very offensive, and she does not like it. She may have told him once or twice, or she may not even have to tell him, and she can make a complaint to the committee which is there. So I can share with you, and here I want to give a very, very, how would I put it, balanced view, because I happen to be on 2 or 3 committees of the MNCs. which I was as an outsider. As I said, you need to have an independent person, basically a lady who would either be activist, but they took me not because I'm an activist, but being a lady and a lawyer. So I was there on a couple of committees which is there. So how it functions, I'll just tell you in a very simple manner. So this committee sits, and then this is the complainant who comes in. The complainant sometimes is not, depends on what category of her employment is. So whatever it is, the complainant comes in, and first she's just kind of calmed down and she just made her comfortable. Thereafter they speak to her and they find out what the problem was. They hear her out. They ask her, what is the proof that you have? Now ultimately, when a committee is examining all these things, they are like a quasi-court, and when I'm saying quasi-court means like the investigation part of it. Now ultimately, I have a grudge against him because he's my boss and he's yelled at me because I'm always late, I do not do my work. So can I make a complaint against him saying that he did that? So they also want to rule out this possibility that there are no false complaints made, and these complaints are based on facts and based on evidences if possible. So such a complaint comes, and which is first given in writing by the victim, as they call it, and then that complaint is given. Then is where the questioning of the girl starts. And when I mean by questioning, it's not grilling, but it is questioning. And the difference between grilling and questioning is twofold: is to understand more about her, to understand more about how she works, what is her work profile, what is the possibility of her to have that kind of intimacy, which I don't mean sexual, but I mean intimacy to the boss concerned, whether she is reporting to him directly or she really doesn't have to interact with him or whatever, just to see the hierarchy which is there. The number of years that she has spent in the organization, whether it is how has been her track record, and all these things are gone into, and I think it's extremely important to understand. Now I'll tell you my experience which was there. One of these big port companies were there, MNCs, Dubai based. They had some complaint over here and they had invited me to be on their committee. So this is not my view, I'm just going to share what has happened. I leave it for you all to decide. So there was this lady who was around 30-35 years of age, who apparently, I was told, has made a complaint. A copy of the complaint was given to me before I came for the meeting. On the committee, we had two people who were foreigners. They were Americans, ladies, they were Americans. So, but then since it was a case of sexual harassment complaint, the management had told them to fly down from Dubai and be a part of this committee to see, because it obviously meant that the credibility of the organization. And there were two internal people. One of the gentlemen was there who was at a senior level, and I was called as a. So this lady was a 35-year-old lady who was working as a personal secretary to one of the vice presidents there. So that was her status. Not very articulate and fluent in the way she was expressing. She was not even able to say what she wanted to say in English. We asked her to speak in English because obviously there were two other women who were Americans and obviously they did not know which is there. But we could find out that she was not very fluent about it. That's fine. So these two ladies told that Mrunalini, why don't you talk to her in whichever language that she can talk, and you can tell us what she says, because we want her to be comfortable in expressing what she is going through. Because language is just a means of communication. If you are not happy with English, you can speak in Marathi, Gujarati, whatever the things are. So her mother tongue was Gujarati, and she started to speak to me, and she said, I can speak to you in Hindi. I said, don't understand Gujarati much. So I asked her, and she started saying that, I said, what's your background? See, a lawyer that I am, it very naturally comes out to grill the person, because we are so used to cross-examining people. So first we need to know the credibility of the person. It is just something which is, we are trained to do that. So we just need to know what is the credibility. This is generally finding out, what are you doing, what's your family background, married, blah, 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 etc., family, etc. So we learnt that she was divorced and she had a 7 or 8 year old child, came from an extremely, lower middle class or a modest background, and had got this job with a great difficulty, and this job meant a lot to her because she had a daughter and she had to take care of the daughter because the husband had abandoned her. Something to that extent was there. So then I realized that yes, so there was a responsibility that this girl had, not only that she wanted a job, but she had a responsibility of a daughter whom she had to raise. So obviously finance was one of the things. So these are things that come to you whilst you're talking to the person. Then we found out how long did she know him and what was the interaction. So I'll tell you exactly what she said, and I said, when did you experience this so-called sexual, according to her, he made sexual advances to her and, physically tried to touch her to the point of molestation, is what she said in the complaint. I said, okay, let's go there step by step. How long you know her, how long you know him, what was the nature of your job, how would you work, etc., etc. What is the background of your boss? So he's married, he's got 2 kids, he lives in Bombay. So what happened on that day when you had written a complaint? They said we had an offsite, or they have something which is somewhere in some part of Gujarat, I don't know, Valsad or somewhere, which was a guest house, and there was some offsite which was there. So they had gone, and there were a whole lot of people which were there. Being a vice president, he was allotted an accommodation which was a little separate from the others who were there. And she said that the day one was okay. The next day in the afternoon, which she says happened to be a Sunday, he asked me that you come to my place where he was staying, in the sense that was an accommodation given to him, and I want to dictate something urgent, some letters have to go, etc., etc. Now she, being a secretary, she said, okay, I'll come. So I said, yes. How was the place? So she said it was like a small bungalow kind of a thing. There was a ground floor, drawing room was there, and there was a staircase which went up, and that's all she could see. So I said, where did you go? So she said, I went there. And I sat down and I told him that, yes sir, I've got my whatever paper or laptop, etc., to take whatever letters which are there. So it seems he told her, oh, you must be very tired, etc., etc. Have something to drink, some tea, some coffee. Do you like some wine or something? So she said, no, I don't drink wine, but I don't mind some tea or something. So the persons came and gave. I said, then what happened? She said, after 10-15 minutes, he said that, listen, I have to dictate a lot of things to you. So don't sit so far off because I can't say it so loudly. Come and sit near the sofa. So it was a big thing. So come and sit near the sofa. I said, then what happened? Then she said, we went, and then he started dictating something. And he said, my back is hurting me. He told her that my back is hurting me, and I don't think I can sit at the sofa for a long time. So why don't you do one thing, that I'm going up, my bedroom is upstairs, I'll just lie down because my back is hurting, and I will dictate to you. So they had finished probably some 2 or 3 paragraphs. So she said, I thought that my boss was not well, so we went up. After they went up, this is what she tells her exactly. So the bed was there, and there was no, there was no chair as such. So there was no chair or something. So there was this some kind of a stool which was there. So she pulled up the stool very close to the bed, and she was sitting there with her laptop. I said, then did the dictation start? So he said, yeah, he dictated for some time. I said, then what happened? Then he said, okay, you must be very tired, no? You came here and didn't sleep and all. Why don't you just come and relax yourself next to me on the bed? So I said, yes. Then what did you do? Then she said, yeah, I was very tired, so I went. And I just said, okay, I'll also relax and I will just sit back. And then he just came very close to me and he said, listen, I've been watching you, observing you for a long time. You're very pretty and you seem a little sad. Please share with me what your problems are personal. I may be your boss in office, but I can be your friend, your confidant, etc., etc. So she started telling him all these things. And then he just took her and she started sobbing. Then he held her and he comforted her, etc., etc. I said, yeah, this all happened. That's very fine, very humane of the boss. I said, then what happened? Then he said that, listen, I'm also very unhappy. I'm married, I've got 2 kids, blah, 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 but I'm not very happy with my marriage. You see, both of us are sailing in the same boat. And then what happened? And then she said, I also felt sad for him. He just held me and the rest is history. So we did come close to each other physically. So I said, then what happened? Then she said, then we went back. And then after we had this, physical intimacy, then we used to meet sometimes often, or whenever he used to travel, I used to go. So I said, which means you were physically intimate with him, knowing fully well that he's your boss and he's not your husband and he's not your boyfriend. So she said, yes. And then what happened? Then she said, this went on for some time, etc., etc. Then she said, all of a sudden, after 6 months, there was a new personal secretary which was appointed. And a very attractive girl, probably from what she says. I say, all of a sudden, this man just refused to look at me. He never did anything. And she started sobbing. And he said, and I said, whilst the time, during the period that you guys were, sort of interacting with each other at an intimate level, What was it? He used to buy lots of gifts for me, he used to get handbags for me, he used to get things for my daughter, etc., etc. So there was an exchange which was a material thing. When this lady comes in who's an attractive one, that is the time they decide, she decides that he is not paying attention, and she went and she filed a complaint. So this was a case which I dealt, and which I was able to unearth the truth behind the complaint and actually what happened. Maybe probably being a lawyer, know how to, sort of get these things done. And then I explained this entire thing to the committee which was there, because there were two other people who also knew Hindi, so so they also were a part of the whole thing, and we explained to that. So this complaint of sexual harassment arose from a point of being possessive about the man with whom she was in love with, or who was in a way a provider for her. And at the end of the day, there was a whole lot of things that happened, and it's a big MNCs. How it is dealt with, these complaints which are there. What is the moral of the story? The moral of the story here is that what the man did was right. Of course not. He should not have done that. He did it because she was in a position which was she was lower. So it's a power equation that comes into play, that I am the boss and you are the one who is there. And since you are my junior or you are my secretary, you are supposed to do. So this comes from the power equation. So this is what you have to draw from this. Secondly, what is the important thing that we understood from this? That though it was consensual, maybe she was tempted or she was lured into making it a physically intimate things was there, was also because of the fact that she was a divorcee and she'd been separated from her husband, a 35-year-old lady, for nearly 2-3 years. There was something in her that also wanted to have that intimacy with the man. And at the end of the day, whatever, there was a settlement that took place. She decided to leave the job because her daughter got something else and they transferred, etc., etc. And some amount of compensation was there, which is also the conciliation, procedure which is there. Now these are the kind of cases which are there. And diametrically opposite, there was one case, because I was on the committee at the IIT Mumbai on the sexual harassment committee. One of the girl students, she had come and she said that she filed a complaint, so she came before us. When she came before us and we asked her all these questions, and then we realized that there was a power equation again. Her guide at the IIT, in the IIT campus itself, her guide was attracted to her because she was an attractive woman, and he was a man at the end of the day. And he would, it was a very strange way. He would insult her, abuse her, call her names, run her down, and she would cry. And then she would go to him and say that, sir, you're my guide, please advise me what is to be done. So it was a different kind of a thing. This was not seducing the girl, or this was not kind of, going to her in a different manner, but it's a very aggressive way of doing it, running her down and saying you're good for nothing, you do not know anything, etc., etc. And trying to say that I'm not going to give you any grades and you're not going to get, etc., etc. And out of that, she went to ask him, how do I do this, how do I do not, and so on and so forth. That is when we realized that this was a genuine case of where she was forced to be not close to him, but to succumb to all his pressures only because he was a guide. And that is exactly what the Act says. And this is exactly what the Act says, that the power equation will have to be taken into consideration when a complaint has been made by a lady regarding the sexual harassment which is there. So having said this, I would just like to give you what the definition is, so that I do not miss out on anything, and you also understand what is sexual harassment as defined into the Act. So before I get into it, so the 2013 Act of Sexual Harassment at the Workplace was obviously on the recommendations of the Justice Verma Committee, where they said that you need to have an enactment. You can't just go by the guidelines given by the Supreme Court. You need to have an act in its place, because obviously the force of an act is the force of an act, and we need to have this, and that is how the Act came into the force. So sexual harassment has been described, and this is what it says. For the purposes of sexual harassment, and I'll explain to you all the words, it includes such unwelcome sexually determined behavior, whether directly or by implication, as physical contact and advances, a demand or a request for sexual favors, sexually colored remarks, showing pornography, any other unwelcome physical, verbal, non-verbal conduct of sexual nature. Where any of these acts is committed in circumstances where under the victim of such conduct has a reasonable apprehension that in relation to the victim's employment or work, whether she is drawing salary, honorarium, etc., whether in public or private, such conduct can be humiliating and may constitute a health and safety problem. It is discriminatory when the woman has reasonable grounds to believe would take advantage, etc., etc. So you have now understood what the law means by sexual harassment. So this is, they have given a very detailed thing. So which is what when I started by saying that if a male colleague, and I would like to give him the benefit of doubt that it was in pure jest that he may have sent something which is sexually colored, or may have, nowadays with these WhatsApp stuff we forward things without even applying our mind, because when you read it you just laugh and you just sometimes you like it and you just forward it without realizing that it could have, and even if it is done in good faith. So what the point here I'm trying to make is, even if it is done in good faith and even if it is done in a manner which is very honest and very simple, friendly kind of thing, could be used against you if proven before the committee and action could be taken. So yes, men need to be more vigilant and women need to be also vigilant to decipher between what is said in a jest and to decipher between what is said with a view to undermine her modesty, her dignity and her status as a woman. So this is a thin line of difference that would have to be done. Otherwise you'll be, the complaints committee will be flooded with these cases which are there, and some of them may be genuine, some of them may not be genuine. So it becomes very important for the complaint committee, the internal complaints committee as they call it, ICC, to examine all these points when a complaint is made and give a balanced view. Because as much as you need to listen to the complainant, you also need to listen to the person who is the accused, as they would call it, or against whom the complaint is made, to understand the other side of the story. Because otherwise, then it's not fair to come to any conclusion unless you hear both sides of the story. And that is the reason this is what is detailed. Okay. I'll just tell you about the sexual harassment. Now, why is it they say that the Sexual Harassment Act is affecting the fundamental rights of a woman? Because it starts, and the only important things that you need to know is Article 14, Article 15, Article 21 and Article 91G. Now what are these articles that we are talking about? I'll explain, and how in relevance to these articles this act has to be examined. So article says equality before law, that's fine, anybody can complain. Article 15 says prohibition of discrimination on the grounds of religion, race, caste and sex. So here in a sexual complaint, the discrimination is done because I'm a female worker and he's a male worker and he's in a power position or he's a power equation. So that is what it is. However, Article 15 says that there is prohibition on the discrimination of these grounds. But Article 15, and see how wonderful a document our Constitution is there. Article 15 subclause 3 says, nothing shall prevent the state, and when you end the state you mean the nation, nothing shall prevent the state from making special laws for women and children. So on one hand you say there is equality, on one hand you say there is prohibition of a discrimination, and in the same section, Article 15.3 says that nothing shall stop the state from making in the interest of the women and children. So this is what they... The third one is Article 21, before I go to 498A. Article 21, which is right to life, and when you talk about right to life, it is right to life to live with dignity, with status, and it cannot be that you lead your life in a manner which is very humiliating or something which is very oppressive in nature, physical, emotional, or whatever the case may be. And 19(1)G, which deals with what is known as right to every citizen to profess his profession, trade, business, etc., etc. Today I am, and suppose if I am expertise in law and I'm working in a legal department in an MNC which is there, okay? I have a right to work there because I'm qualified enough to do so. If I'm treated in a manner which is discriminating me because A, I'm a woman, B, the power equation where the head of the legal department tries to, whatever the way I just explained to you further which happens. I'm inhibited from exercising my rights of working or professing my profession or trade because of these things which are there. So in short, without going more into the details, these are the 4 articles which which the Supreme Court had taken into consideration at the time of the Vishakha judgment which they passed and the guidelines which they gave, and have said that these are the articles which are infringing the rights of the women or the citizens in the country, and hence we need an act to take care of that. So that's as far as sexual harassment. Rest whenever we have the question answer sessions, I'll get to you. The other act which I will touch upon is something which I practice practically every day in my profession, is the section 498A of the IPC, that's the Indian Penal Code, which, as I said, has Penal Code is 1860 Macaulay's Code, and then it was for years on end we had never brought about any amendments to the Act. 83, the section was introduced wherein it was said that cruelty as defined was defined under the civil law, whether it was a matrimonial law or torts or something. So cruelty now came under the umbrella of a criminal law, and that is so having penal sort of consequences. And it says that if a woman, so whoever perpetrates violence, cruelty, whether it's mental, physical, emotional, or in the form of making demands on a woman, by the husband, by her relatives, by her near ones, dear ones, etc., will all be liable to be framed under that particular section. Obviously, it was done with an extremely noble intention that no woman, and this is to be read with the Dowry Prohibition Act, which I'll not get into the details of it, because if there are any dowry demands made, it came under that. So obviously, it's a very, very noble, very hallowed provision which was made, amendment which was carried out. Amendment was carried out to see the growing needs of the society. We had a lot of cases where there were bride burning. There were a lot of cases where there was harassment to the wife and the family for the monetary demands. You see more in the northern states, which is there, where these things were more. I'm not saying it's not all over the India, but primarily in the northern states it was there, and hence this enactment was done. The enactment was done with this view in mind. It did serve a purpose to some extent because there were genuine cases where the husband or the in-laws or whoever the persons concerned were there. But it was also abused and misused in a whole lot of cases. And as a result of which, people said that this kind of a draconian law which is there, section 498 of the IPC which is there, which gives sweeping powers to the police to deal with the complaint of a lady which came to them with a complaint of harassment or things like that which is there, without any thorough investigation, gave them absolutely, we have someone here who's going to talk more about it, the procedural part of it and how it is done, but I'm just talking to you as a lawyer, and gave them complete sweeping powers to deal with it the way they wanted. And it also ended in quite a few cases where innocent family members, and there would be old people who were 70, 75, the father-in-law, who poor thing had nothing to do with the dispute between the husband and wife. Or sometimes there were people who were just related by blood but lived in some other places where they were also roped in. Why? Because the section says so and because the Act says so. The problem today that I face here is that this section, this enactment has not percolated down to the have-nots and have been abused by the haves. Today, in my experience as a lawyer, I have seen that women, for better financial gains, for better settlement, for better monetary division of assets or whatever is this, use this thing as a weapon to kind of arm twisting thing to come around and make certain things which are there. The number of cases, there are statistics, but I think we are now running short of time. Maybe I'll say that if there are any questions put in, that the number of cases that were filed and the conviction that took place. So a complaint is filed, the whole trial goes on, and the conviction is there. So the cases which were filed, if you say on a scale of 10, were say 90 cases were filed and conviction was 10 or 12. So there were only 10 or 12 cases which were found to be genuine cases. I'll just take one last thing and I'll tell you. In the High Court, I was just talking about last week. I was in the High Court. Now there is a provision, it's a non-bailable offence. So if at all you have to settle or you want to withdraw, you have to ask for the quashing of the proceedings under 482 of the CRPC. So normally when these matters get settled, the husband goes to the court and says, listen, we've settled our matrimonial dispute, I'm going to pay her XYZ amount, I'm going to now do this and kindly quash. Earlier the courts used to do for the asking, come on, it's good, the matters are coming to an end, the dispute is coming to an end. The Bombay High Court recently has taken upon itself, good, bad, I have no comments to make, where they say, and they come out very caustic in the open court, so you have filed a case of 498A against your husband and your in-laws. Now please tell me, why do you not want to pursue that violence case, that cruelty case? Why do you want to take money now and settle the matter and say that okay, let it be quashed, it's okay if these charges are removed and the matter gets quashed? Please tell us. We are here as courts to help you out, to teach them a lesson. Are you genuine in your complaint? Is there truth in your complaint? And in 2 cases, it happened in the Bombay High Court, they have fined the lady for filing false case under 498A, having a settlement, it's a monetary settlement, and then coming to it. They said, yes, the law provides that we have to quash these proceedings when there is a consent, so we cannot go beyond the law. We are bound by the law, the judges said. But we can definitely exercise our discretion and say, we want to stop this process which goes on, that you file a case, knock out some money and do it. If you are genuinely, there was cruelty on you, there was demand on you, why have you not pursued it till the end? We would support you, we would stand by you, we would give you all help which is required, even the help of a legal aid. These are the words. So today, even the judiciary is taking the view. Judgment of Justice Prasad has also dealt with it, because this is not only law, this is about social structure, this is social fiber, this is about how everything impacts each other, whether society impacts law, law impacts society, and so on and so forth. Anyway, but I'm eternally grateful to her for giving me this opportunity, and more on 498 and sexual harassment if it comes up in the course of our discussions in the question answer. Thank you so much for your patience today.